Okay, so keeping on that same thread there of sports figures all up in the media right now, let's talk about Mr. Jon Gruden. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Jon Gruden is the former head coach of the Raiders. I was getting ready to say Oakland, but the Raiders have since moved to Las Vegas. He is the former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders.
You know what's so funny? You know what's so funny? I'm sorry to cut you off. Jon Gruden has actually coached both Raiders teams that were in Oakland and was now in Las Vegas and whatnot, which is
yes, and he also was a coach for the Bucks.
And he also was one of the head coach for the Bucks who helped them win their first ever Super Bowl.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's when Brad Johnson was quarterback. He had left the Redskins after being there, I think it was like a year or so, or at the time they were called the Redskins, aka the Washington football team.
I think he got traded over there.
He was, so Brad Johnson is who I'm talking about, the quarterback. He was over there for like a year or something. He got cut, went over to Tampa Bay that same year, won the Super Bowl with them. So that speaks to the Washington football team ability to completely fuck up having talent and not utilizing that talent. But I digress.
No, it's all right. But it's very funny about his situation. So he actually started he was actually the Vikings, QB in the mid 90s. But then a guy named Dante Culpepper came in the league and took his spot. No, Cunningham. Randall Cunningham took his spot and whatnot.
Yeah, Culpepper was the quarterback.
Yeah, and I think, and Cunningham lost his job to Culpepper. That's what it was. But, just a cool sports fact.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the specific question is, should anyone be surprised about Jon Gruden's racist emails? So I'm going to throw this to Mr. PAT to start us off. What say you, sir?
So I'll admit, I don't know much about this Jon Gruden guy, but from reading a few articles about...
He's not that special.
Yeah, I figured I was like, okay, nah. Yeah, he's not that special. So, yeah, I agree. So, yeah, I don't know much about him. Don't really care about him either way. But from reading a few articles about his emails, it's pretty clear to me what kind of person this guy is. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I don't watch football. And let me just say this. That's not because I dislike the sport in and of itself, but more so because I see it as the bread and circuses of today. Basically, we're living in the modern day Roman Empire, and people are pacified by food and entertainment while more important matters are taking place. That's basically what bread and circuses means for those who weren't aware.
That's dope. That's true.
Yeah. So basically it's a distraction. I'm going to just put it like that. It's a distraction. Also, and I'm going to say something that might be controversial, even though it probably shouldn't be very controversial, because honestly, I'm not the first person who has said this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I see the draft as a modern day slave auction. I'm gonna just put it like that. I see.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I see the draft.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Well, it's not that I didn't know that. It's just that the key or stark difference for me would be that no slave was paid millions and millions of dollars, whether they performed or not. And in these modern day sports, some of these athletes get millions and millions of dollars, get an injury, and even though they don't get the full balance of their contract, they still get paid millions of dollars and never have to worry about money again. And that was never the case in the slave trade.
Well, yeah, it's not exactly the same, of course, but it's the I'm gonna say the visual aspect of it. Of course, the differences that there are differences because obviously money is in the NFL, and of course, slaves weren't paid. We know
that's the only difference,
right? That's pretty much the only difference, at least from my vantage point, anyway.
Yeah, you got to look at things when things modernize. It's supposed to be like a nostalgic and whatnot. It's supposed to be like, well, so put it like this. So back when our ancestors were being enslaved, they were being sold, they wasn't getting paid, and they were getting raped, incest, and things of that nature. Right. Now we look at the way now it's modernized now, we formulate it into an arena, where you have owners, then you have these people who have money, then you have they're gladiators, so they need equipment, they need some type of safety stuff, the pads, the helmets, and all that other stuff, right? Now when you add money into play, you have to keep your, it's almost like how they kept the slaves, wouldn't say happy, but somewhat content, where they feed them the scraps.
No slaves were content. And that's my issue with these kind of comparisons. Yeah. It is a completely different world. I think those kind of comparisons are used inappropriately. There are no freedoms. There was no decision making. There was no consciousness or availability or ability to make any kind of decision over your life in general with slavery. These athletes choose to go into these arenas. A lot of them are in college or etc. when they're drafted. They could very well choose to stay in college and get a degree. They choose to become an athlete because of the money. That's a choice. Slaves didn't have choices. And if you look at the argument, but once they agree to that contract, they basically got to follow the terms. That's the way any job works. When you take a job, you agree to follow the terms of that job. It's for me, those two things just don't equate because there are entirely too many freedoms with being an athlete that came nowhere near close to slavery. Slavery, in my opinion, was just too atrocious to equate to anything modern.
Slaves
were cattle.
They have it's hard to say the word freedom, but I would say they have what you call, in my eyes, I like to call condition freedom, because
that's true.
In the way you look at it,
is not equivalent to slavery. There was no term of freedom in slavery. People were trying to escape and being caught and killed. Any form of freedom whatsoever means it's not equivalent to slavery. Slaves didn't have that option. They had no options. They could not decide their lives. They could not decide their children. They could not decide their marriages. They had no freedoms. They were seen as livestock. They were seen as property. Mm-hmm. These people are electing to be in these lifestyles, and they're being paid millions of dollars for it.
Which is basically, I'm sorry, PAT, but which is true, but it's being modernized. So when you take something onto a new form, you have to change it where it doesn't look like something, but it is.
I was going to get into that. Yep.
Yeah, but I'm gonna let you continue.
Still doesn't equate though. It does. That's you can modernize or evolutionize a lot of things. Slavery is not one of them. You can claim, I see the point that you're getting at, that they don't have the ability to make the full decisions they want to. Okay, that's fair. But that doesn't equate to slavery because they're not being changed. They're not being forced to eat a certain way, sleep a certain way, and killed at will, and it's all legal. So those major parts of slavery negates the ability to use being an athlete as an analogy to it.
They might be pretty soon, based upon some of the football players who are not trying to get the jab. But I'm gonna let PAT, finish his thought.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a great conversation to have. And I mean, and I see where you're coming from, Naya, but well, E-Man already broke it down. So when the comparison to slavery is made, it's not saying, oh well, it's exactly like back when there was like slavery, slavery, like, and I'm gonna be real, we're still enslaved to this day. Like honestly, we're all still slaves. But the thing is, it's different. It's modernized, as E-Man already stated. We're in a system of modern day slavery. So slavery is just took on a new form. Basically, it's never going to be the same as what it was in the past. Of course, we know the atrociousness of the past, and we understand that history. But now I
can tell you why.
We're in the present day. We're in the future. We're in the present day where it's different. It's modernized, and it's just adjusted to today's times.
I understand the point. I disagree with the analogy. It's not the appropriate analogy to make. There will be no way to make an appropriate analogy to slavery unless you're talking about the Holocaust. That is the only thing that is equivalent to slavery, and close to equivalent to slavery. And the reason I say that is because I understand the point you're making. You're saying that you're saying there are certain conditions that are being imposed on people for taking that contract, right? They still don't get to be 100% free. That's fine. It's still not an equivalent analogy to slavery, though. There will never be an equivalent analogy to slavery, no matter whether you say it's the modernized version or not, because there was never, and there never will be, another event in the history of man as atrocious as slavery. And you can't just take the parts of it that you want to compare. It was too drastic and dire of a situation to do that.
So sorry to cut you off now, Andrew, but I remember I said this in a few episodes, or I think I said it, early down when we first started, but you always have to remember that they can only handle a little bit of chaos, but they can't handle mayhem. Because once mayhem hits, that's when shit gets out of control. So they have to make sure to control everything. Chaos must happen. That's why they control people with fear. Right. They can give chaos because that's something you can pull in and out, but you cannot control mayhem.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with the inappropriate analogy to slavery? I understand your point. You're saying that the reason that they can't fully go back to slavery is because it would be mayhem, and they know they can't control mayhem. I get that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still an inappropriate analogy to slavery, because nothing will ever be able to equate to slavery. If you're saying they're in a state of still not allowing full freedom to a certain extent in that role, I agree with that. But that's still not equivalent to slavery. What I'm trying to say is, in my opinion, for lack of a better term, it's somewhat disrespectful to slavery to compare it to anything we're facing in modern times, because there's parts of similarities don't mean equivalency. So if you were to say that we're in modern day slavery because athletes can't do 100% of what they want to do when they are being paid millions of dollars, LeBron James is a fucking billionaire. There will never have been any slave that was ever a billionaire. And again, I understand the core of what you're saying, that to a certain extent, they're not allowed their 100% freedom, but no job allows for that. Even when you are the CEO of your own company, you still can't say certain shit because you'd be sued. You still can't do certain things because there are consequences. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying in that regard. But so let me put it like this. So let's just strip it down let's just strip it down bare bones to the minimum. So when I say like the NFL or the NBA or whatever is like, I guess like a modern day slavery or the slave auction or whatever.
Most
I'm
people
looking
say
at
plantation.
or the plantation. I'm looking at it as, so we have white owners and we have these, well, in this case, black athletes that are working for white owners. That's what I mean when I say strip it down to the bare bones. Is we're still in a dynamic of white owners and black, in a way, black servitude.
But
so
those servitude, they're making that choice to serve. Slaves didn't have a choice to serve.
Right. And that's true. But it's just, I'm looking at the optics. I'm just looking at the optics. It's not necessarily about, saying one's exactly like the other. Because of course there's differences. There's going to be the differences because of the times. But when we look at slavery, it's just basically saying you don't have freedom. Like you don't have freedom. And really in these days and times, we don't. We do, but we don't. We're still in the time of modern day slavery.
You still have to have a template to start something.
Have you all ever looked up the definition of slavery?
Yeah.
Okay. It means bondage, enslavement, servitude, subjugation, thraldom, vassalage, enthrallment, yoke, captivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
these words do not apply to people who choose to be in that lifestyle.
Actually, it is. Actually, it's just
we're still in captivity.
No,
that's a whole thing.
It still is, but it's modern.
Everyone, if that's but I understand what you're saying about modern day. But what I'm saying is, I chose the role that I'm in. And I know that there is a contract that's associated to my job. Just like even when you start a business, right? Depending on the business type you select, there are rules and regulations within that business type that you select, say, whether you're a sole proprietor or LLC or etc. But you're still the owner of your own business. That is not a fortune that anyone who was a slave would have had, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean,
right. Yeah. Slaves back then, of course. Yeah. Back then, no, they couldn't have any of that stuff. They couldn't work. I mean, they couldn't have jobs. They couldn't, own a business. They couldn't do anything. So when we say slaves back then, like there was a different slavery back then and there's a different slavery now. I think that's what me and E are trying to get across.
Yes, and I agree with that there is a difference between slavery then and slavery now. And that's my point, that because there is a difference, because of the world we're in now, it's an inappropriate analogy. That's my point.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
it's a different world.
Yeah,
it is. That we can agree on. We can agree it's definitely a different world.
That is different, but before I wouldn't say, sorry to cut you off, BAT. But what I wanted to say basically, and I think I already said it before, but you need a template for like almost anything that you build and create. Without that template, I wouldn't say you can't see what you're trying to grow, but it helps you build for the next thing and whatnot.
Sure.
And everything had a template to every single thing, like, and here comes the craziest thing. And I'm going to use something as simple as like the slave trade and whatnot, the Arabs started the slave trade and whatnot,
Right.
England was broke. UK was broke. They were so broke to the point that they convinced the Arab, let's jump in the slave trade with them. And that's how someone started a template, and boom, they got others to join in. Because why?
But the difference is now we can create our own templates where we didn't, using your own example, you're absolutely right. But the difference is now we have the ability to create our own template when back then we didn't. You're right.
Thing.
It's great
but they
to have
had
a
a
template
to start with. That's how.
But that wasn't what you said originally, though. Your example of the template, and you needed to outline what you're trying to accomplish, right? You're absolutely right. But the difference between then and now is that now we have the ability to create our own templates as opposed to being forced to follow one. In other words, these athletes are not forced to sign these contracts.
They're not.
They're electing to. So by doing that, they are voluntarily giving up their rights to certain things. If they don't want to do that, I understand it's big money, but again, that's a part of what they're accepting. If they don't want to do that, they don't have to. Stay in college, get your degree, go into another line of work. You are choosing to be subjugated to certain stuff. Well, if you are choosing to do that, then you can't turn around and cry wolf. You made that decision.
A lot of them do though. That's
exactly. Now that I agree with you with wholeheartedly.
And
that's true.
And that's how you create from, and that's and just me just going back from the whole template thing. They already have one, but to keep bettering something, you have to make sure you add and change certain things to your template to keep growing what you have. And that's
I totally agree with that too.
That's what's mostly been happening. So that's what it is, because many people tend to forget that slavery everyone, they showed us what physical slavery looks like. No one talks about how the mental slavery is. No one talks about how the psychiatric of like slavery and whatnot, because the mind itself is extremely powerful.
No, I agree with that, but that wasn't exactly the point that I was agreeing with what you said before. You're correct that you have to keep changing the template and adapting it in order to reach its best version. And my point with that is we have the ability to do that now. We didn't have the ability to adapt and change slavery back then. We couldn't say, hey, slave master, we don't like the way you're doing things. We don't like the way you're forcing us to pick this cotton. We want to pick this cotton and
chips. If you think about it, like with the slave revolts and things like that, there was still a pushing for a change. So what happened?
That was a pushing for freedom.
Right,
that wasn't a pushing for a change to slavery. That was a pushing from freedom from the slavery.
Right, but with that push for the freedom, what happened was there was still adjustments to the template. So when these slave masters see slaves basically keep on fighting their enslavement, and it becomes too much for them, eventually they say, okay, what can we do to adjust this so we can still keep them enslaved, but have them not fight their enslavement?
But that wasn't what ended slavery. What ended slavery was one of their needs to actually use Black people to fight in the army. Let me be clear. Abraham Lincoln didn't release slaves because they kept fighting against it and they wanted to, just be done.
They were fighting.
He released slaves so that slaves can fight in the Union and defeat
they can fight for the Union. Yeah. No, that's true. But the fact is, slaves were still fighting. They were fighting their enslavement. Yeah, they were enslaved, but they were fighting their enslavement, and that's a disruption.
No, I totally agree with that. But that wasn't what my concern was. All of these points you all are making are valid points, but that wasn't what my concern was. My concern was with the analogy that athletes of today are modern day slaves. I disagree with that terminology. That's the only part. The other parts are valid. I totally agree with that. It's just my individual opinion is that
okay. Okay.
Yeah, and we could definitely agree to disagree on that point.
Mm-hmm.
My whole thing was basically where I was going with it was so I mentioned the slave auction. I wasn't necessarily trying to get too deep off into like slavery in and of itself.
Right, yeah, that one was on me, sir.
Okay, yeah, because that's why I said the slave auction, because I was like, okay, well, this is kind of, and I'm looking at the optics. That's what I'm looking at. It's the optics of white owners and these black men who are under these white owners. That it was just the optics I was looking at.
Yeah, I can see the optics side of it. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why I mentioned like, okay, this is reminding me of, it's basically like a modern day slave auction, so that's why I brought that up. But,
yes, optically, I agree. I see you, sir. I feel you.
Yeah, so that's pretty for the listeners out there. That's where I was going with that. Because basically we see white coaches recruiting a majority of black athletes. White owners, black, we'll say workers in this case. So of course, that's one thing that is a turnoff for me. I'm gonna speak for myself. Aside from that, everything that took place with Colin Kaepernick really disgusted me. I'm gonna just put that out there. So that really just turned me off, because when it comes to football, we'll just say the NFL. When it comes to the NFL, even though I wasn't like an avid watcher of it, I would still tune in from time to time. And I did used to watch the Super Bowls. And the reason I would watch them is just to be in the know, pretty much, because I didn't want to be one of those people that came into work and, people were talking about who won the Super Bowl and I didn't know who won, I didn't know who won or who lost. I just wanted to be in the know. Like, okay, these are the two, teams playing in the championship. Let me see who's the winner. Let me see who's the loser. That way, when people talk about it, I know what the fuck people are talking about. That was pretty much my role in that. But the whole situation with Kaepernick really turned me off. So I was basically like, fuck NFL. That's pretty much what my attitude was. Because at that point, I was like, okay, I see the NFL's true colors. I see what's going on here. So let's just be real. Racial justice is not something that they care about. The owners really don't care. Yeah, they don't. And I mean, it is what it is. I'm not asking.
Kaepernick still won at the end of the day. He got his $20 million contract from Nike, though. But that's a whole nother story. Like,
yeah. Totally. And me saying that, I'm not asking them to care. I don't really give a fuck if they care or if they don't. I'm just stating, a fact. They don't care about racial justice. We know the owners don't care. It's clear as day to me. You had one of the owners, I believe it was Bob McNair, quote, inmates running the prison. I remember when that statement was made and I was like, man, that's really fucking atrocious. You got a white owner basically calling players like prisoners.
Bob McNair is a very Southern guy. Like he's the owner. He's actually the owner of the Tennessee Titans when they were called the Oilers. But he one of those deep down South like guys. So yeah, he'll say something like that.
So he's an open racist. He's pretty much
basically.
Once I heard that, I was like, oh, this is one of them. This is the overt racist right here. Okay, all right. You got your covert and you got your overt. He's on the overt side of the equation. Got it. So yeah, I heard that and I was like, oh, so that that's how they look at NFL players now. Okay, they talking about inmates running the prison. All right, dude. Oh, all right. So when I heard that, I was like, I can only imagine what other owners have said and are still saying. Obviously at this point we know the NFL has racist people in it. There's no doubt about that. So Jon Gruden's emails doesn't surprise me at all. I'm pretty sure there are owners and coaches and other NFL employees who are circling the wagons right now and trying to get rid of any suspect emails.
Jerry Jones.
I'm pretty sure.
Jerry Jones.
Sure that's happening right now.
Jones.
All these motherfuckers are probably circling the wagons right now. That's
Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
Awesome opinions.
Jerry Jones.
Yep. So
I'm not a Cowboys
We're not
fan.
making any specific accusations against Jerry Jones. Just an FYI.
But if something comes up,
I'm
I don't
allegedly
think we should
making
be
these
surprised.
accusations.
But so when someone like Jon Gruden gets caught and then apologizes, let's be real here, people. People like him apologize because they got caught. They don't apologize because they're actually sorry about what they said. It's not even just about him. That's why I said people like him. People like him apologize because they got caught. They don't apologize because they're actually sorry about what they say or what they said. I mean, how many times have we heard about these white folks in high positions make racist statements and then apologize after they get caught? You know how I know they're not truly sorry about what they said? Because if they were truly sorry, they would step forward themselves. They would step forward themselves, not waiting until they get caught, and they would speak on what they said in the past, and they would try to atone for it. But see, that's not how it works. They try to basically they go into damage control afterwards. Yeah, that's what happens. They go into damage control. They get busted, and then basically they want to save face. So yeah, they're not sorry about saying racist things. They're just sorry that their racism has been exposed. That's what they're sorry about. And just to really end off my part of it anyway, I've always said that until Black people actually start owning organizations, this type of thing won't stop. Racist people being exposed is just an endless cycle at this point. It's just one big endless cycle. I mean, just wait and see. Someone else will get caught making racist remarks, and they will probably apologize because they were caught. Rinse, recycle, repeat. The fact of the matter is, and when I say we, I'm talking about Black people. Black people don't own anything. So as a result, we will always deal with people who are racist. We seriously deal with this type of problem by owning our own organizations. That's how you deal with racism. In this case, there would need to be a Black-owned football league, and the Black players of the NFL would have to leave the NFL and play for the Black Football League. I understand and understand that what I just said sounds crazy to people, but people, it's the truth. Black people will not be able to get away from this problem until we extract ourselves from these organizations and build our own. It's really that simple. And I'm going to just end it right there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks a bunch. All right. So, should anyone be surprised about Jon Gruden's racist email? As Pat said, no. I mean, of course not. I'm never surprised when racists emerge from any public figure. I mean, it's crazy that people act like bigotry doesn't exist amongst celebrities. Of course it does. It's actually my understanding that in Jon Gruden's case, there are also misogynistic and homophobic comments in these emails as well. I.e., he is overall a bigot and clearly has been for many years. I mean, okay, so many people have the argument like these emails were from many years ago and people can grow. And to a certain extent, I agree with that. However, the other side of that is just because there aren't any current proofs of it doesn't mean he's not still currently a racist, homophobic, misogynist. There's just no current proof of it. How do we really know he's changed? Because he coaches Black players? Okay. Well, everyone literally coaches Black players. What the fuck? Like literally, there isn't one professional team in the NFL that doesn't have at least 2 Black players on it. We make up the backbone of the players' conglomerate for the NFL, for most sports, actually. What, basketball, football, almost baseball? I mean, come on. The argument he coaches Black people, he's not racist, they do that. Shut the fuck up. Everybody coaches Black people in the NFL. Black people are the majority of the team. We don't have any evidence that Jon Gruden is sorry, other than he said sorry. And he said sorry after the emails were exposed, not prior to. He didn't come out and say, hey, guys, I have an atonement to make here. You know, back then I was a racist asshole. And before any emails come out proving that, let me just go ahead and say I apologize or let me expose them myself. He didn't do that because he's not actually fucking sorry. He apologized because he was exposed. He stepped down because he was going to get fired. It's that simple. That's all it is to it. His behavior exudes overall bigot, not just racism, but also misogyny, homophobia. This man is generally a white man who feels he's superior to anyone that doesn't fall into his lifestyle. His category of superiority is I'm a white man and gays and women and Black people are beneath me. It's that simple. And anyone who's denying it is choosing to be ignorant on this subject because there is no evidence to suggest that he is evolved into something better. He coached Black people. Of course he fucking did. It was his job to do it. Period. And he couldn't really avoid it in the NFL now, could he? I mean, this is very cut and dry for me. Now, let's evaluate the evidence specifically, right? He was first recently called out for racist emails, and then per an article on Fox Sport News, and I quote, the New York Times then released more emails showing Gruden's keyword there, of homophobic and misogynistic remarks, along with comments aimed at Roger Goodell himself. Roger Goodell, quick note for those who don't know, is the commissioner of the NFL. The emails were between him and then Washington football team president Bruce Allen during his time at ESPN. So even when Gruden wasn't specifically coaching players, he was a commentator, he was still making all of these fucking comments and etc. That shows it doesn't matter what position or role he in, this is how he feels, folks. Period. This is his behavior. It doesn't matter the role he plays in the NFL. He's a bigot. He can kiss my ass. I don't give a shit about his apology. I don't give a shit about him resigning. I don't give a shit if he's sorry. Your sorry came after you were exposed, not prior to. Another article says, only a few days after a first email was leaked, that caught Gruden using racist language. More emails surfaced showing that Gruden mocked the drafting of the first openly gay player in NFL history, did not support the emergence of women in the NFL as officials, and vulgarly used the female anatomy as an insult, and called for the release of players protesting during the national anthem. Come on, what are we talking about? Let's be serious. Quit the fucking bull. This guy is clearly a racist, bigot, homophobic, misogynist asshole, and I don't give two shits about his apology. Because that's simple. This is his own behavior. There's evidence of this in his own behavior. These are not, accusations that people are making against him. There are emails. That's documentation of it. It wasn't even like he solely left it at making these comments amongst friends. He didn't give a shit so much that he put this shit in emails and sent it across the web. Now you telling me in 2000 and when the fuck ever these came out, people didn't know that when you send something across the web, you're documenting it essentially? There's always a way to pull that shit back. You telling me it wasn't enough understood about the way that computers worked in 2011? Yes, the fuck it was. He simply didn't care. Because he thought he was communicating with a fellow bigot and it would never get out. So yeah. Am I surprised? Should anyone be surprised? No. And from this big lip Black person, he can kiss my ass. Those are my thoughts on that.
That's a really big ass to kiss, though. Just saying.
Well, he can kiss my ass because, yeah, that's how I feel about it. Throwing it to E-Man to wrap us up. What say you, sir?
Okay. I wanted to come in here with a flair, but I don't know with like y'all really definitely, y'all did. Whew, man, I gotta come in a little harder for this one. So am I shocked or even surprised? Hell no.
Right.
I'll put it like this.
Surprised.
Yeah. Anything that happens in the NFL is no longer shocking nor surprising.
Right.
And I'm not gonna and sorry to digress, but I'm not gonna, piggyback off like the whole Ray Rice situation, but just looking at how that situation went down, it just basically shows like, they know everything. They're just waiting to get you and whatnot. I just feel like the NFL are like comedians, they got all the information on y'all. And when they're ready to get your ass, they be like, ha ha ha, nigga, I got you and whatnot, Yeah. How Dave Chappelle would do it, But that's how I feel what it is with the NFL, So like, one thing I tell everyone is it's your opinion, and how you choose to formulate your own opinion is up to you, Just like how when I say things on here, these are my opinions. People might hate it. I'm like, all right, cool. People might love it. I'm like, all right, cool. But I know, for me, like when it comes to me, I'm cool with anything that comes out my mouth. So I'm definitely cool with it. It don't bother me and whatnot. Don't bother me at all. And, some of these guys, they can't control their own actions, knowing there's always going to be a reaction behind it. because they work. I don't want to say work, but they are attached to a brand or an entity that controls everything you do and your moves and whatnot, And I've actually talked about this with several people, but in my eyes, is the NFL becoming a little soft? Yes, and whatnot, And what I mean by soft, not just them playing, but they're pushing the edge, not on every issue, but they're trying to draw a separation of issues. And what I mean by that is that they're picking and choosing each situation to separate our minds based upon what narrative that they want. And this is one of them. Ray Rice was another one. The list goes on and on and on. Though I wouldn't say what the worst one was, but the one that was extremely shocking. And I'm not going to throw Dante Stallworth, under the bus, but Dante Stallworth, I think at the time he was playing for the Browns. He ran somebody over and whatnot. He did receive jail time, but it was pretty short jail time and whatnot. And he was able to come back and play in the NFL for the Patriots for a brief stunt. And I think, for a brief stunt, because he played for the Saints, the Browns, and the Patriots, because he was part of that huge Super Bowl and whatnot. So yeah, but it's just one of those things, and because remember, the NFL controls their narrative, I mean, I don't care if he calls them, and this whole thing with the whole homophobic thing, it's just someone says one word, everyone's like, oh my damn, it's the end of the world, and I don't know why people are shocked that, oh my gosh, Jon Gruden talks like this. I'm like, okay, he's an adult. He can formulate what he wants to talk about, and he can say everything, what he wants to say. But many people tend to forget, like when you see him on ESPN, all that stuff is scripted, They're told what to say and whatnot while they're on ESPN. They're told what to say, what's going on. They're told what to say, So him writing stuff in emails, I'm like, well, of course they can track emails. I mean, once I send somebody an email, boom, it's like it's already a documentation already, So it's not that hard to find, because you can search for email by words, letters, even letter heads, and you can still, retrieve that email. So it's not hard. But to say like this wasn't coming, well, it was coming. But hey, who was the big winner out of the day? Was it the NFL or was it Jon Gruden? Because at the end of the day, Jon still got money, and I feel like Jon's gonna be okay. So him losing this don't mean shit, That's the same thing that Paul Pierce did with this whole ESPN debacle and whatnot, with the whole stripper thing and whatnot. It seemed like he didn't mean shit. He wanted to just make a stand to make a point, But, will Jon be okay? He'll be okay. Ain't nothing happened to him. He'll be okay. Do I feel like he might lose another job? I doubt it. Who knows? You might see him on College Day or ESPN pretty back soon, So, I mean, NFL coaches gotten fired, not for saying bad things, but they got fired for having poor records and whatnot, and they easily got jobs back. Jon Gruden can still go coach in college football. So he has options. He has options. And here comes the thing I'm about to shock everyone. Do you know an average college coach, head coach, their average salary is about $3 million a year and whatnot? That's their average, average, Jon Gruden had a 10-year deal, almost worth close to damn near, I think, I forget what it was. It was like almost $100 million contract, whatnot. So I think he was getting paid close to almost 10 mil and whatnot, you know? I mean, that's water under the bridge for him, but he probably has a lot more money from coaching when he first started, you know, back in the mid 90s. So, you know, it's not even a loss and whatnot, you know? He gonna find somewhere, he'll be okay. And that's what it's gonna be, you know? And then everyone's gonna forget about it and whatnot. And basically he'll reappear again back and doing the same thing he is. Because for them, there's no consequence for them. Zero. Because if it was an actual consequence, you know, then Jon would actually get, I don't like to use the word canceled, but he would get canceled like how you guys cancel other people and whatnot. But that's not happening. So, you know, it's more like, I would say, I'm going to end it on this. And I'm trying to put the words together that make sense to everyone. All right. All right. No one gives a shit what Jon Gruden did, but Jon is not taking any real repercussions. You know, he's really not. He just lost his coaching job and whatnot. He can go get another one. You know, that's why he has an agent for. You go get another one. You know, it's not it's not like, you know, he's, you know, boom, everything's done. You know, because there are thousands and millions of colleges that have football teams, Division I, II, and III. You know, and you know, he's a hot coaching name. He won a Super Bowl with the same team that won a Super Bowl last year, which I find that interesting. That he's in hot water, but yet his team, his former team he won the Super Bowl with, you know, is actually playing good. Nah, you know, that's just me. But, you know, to really say this was to make it a loss and whatnot, you know, I would say Jon Gruden would basically, you know, be blackballed from coaching job for the rest of his life. But that's not happening, you know. So, you know, Jon says what he wants to say because they know he can get away with anything he chooses to say, you know. But let that be another person, and you will see what the outcome's going to be and whatnot, you know. And to me, that's just, you know, what goes on. I just call it's like another day in the NFL, you know, like another day at work, you know. That's how I feel what it is, you know. It's just another day. So I'm going to end it from there. It's just another day for Jon Gruden. And yeah.
Yes,
you
sir.
know, love loss. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okie dokie. All right. Thank you, sir.